Aloha mai kākou and welcome to Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. I'm Ranger Keone. For many years, the park has shared authentic Hawaiian cultural practices in our in-person Ike Hana No'eau or Experience the Skillful Work demonstrations. Today, I want to take our native traditions beyond our shores into your living room in hopes that you may find a deeper connection to our culture and inspire you to truly find what makes Hawaii so special. So hele mai, make ready, and let's learn together.
Poi is a staple food of the indigenous people of Hawaii, and Kuʻi Kalo is a process of making poi from cooked taro root. For Native Hawaiians, as they eat poi, they are reminded of their older brother, Hāloanakalaukapalili, who through our cosmology story, fed us and continues to feed us today.
We need more people to perpetuate and learn how to Kuʻi Kalo so that we can keep this important practice alive.
Aloha, I'm Ranger Sean.
Aloha, my name is Hayden Konanui-Tucker.
Join us as we learn the traditional method of making poi. Aloha mai, I'm here with Hayden Konanui-Tucker. And would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Aloha, my name is Hayden Konanui-Tucker. I am 17 years old. I am from the Ahupua'a of Keonepoko in Pahua in Puna. I am a current senior at Kamehameha Schools, Hawaii. I am the mo'opuna of Jerry and Gladys Konanui, who has taught me a lot about Hāloanakalaukapalili and all of our Hawaiian namea apau. First and foremost, I would like to start off by saying I am not a kumu. I have taken what I have learned from my kumus, my friends, my family, my ohana, and I have made my own style. One thing about Kuʻi Kalo is that there are so many different styles from each island to each district to each ohana. They have their own way of Kuʻi Kalo. So just because I'm teaching you one style today, how I learned, how I grew up Kuʻi Kalo, doesn't mean that your ohana style is wrong. So if you go home to your kupuna and Kuʻi Kalo with them, you do it their style. And then what you can do is take my style, their style, any other styles you may have learned and make your own.
Around the papaku'iai, is there any protocol that we need to follow?
So a couple things. This is a cutting board basically. You don't step over it because there's all lepo. So what you want to do is keep it clean. If you're gonna stand up and go over it, you walk around. Another thing is with your pohaku ku'iai is whenever you're not using your pohaku, you don't stand it up like this. If something was to happen, we hit the board, it might fall over and crack. And what we don't want to happen is it cracking. So whenever we're not using our pohaku ku'iai, we lay it down and have it go moe, because just like humans, our pohaku has to rest.
What's the first step in this meal?
So first thing, our pohaku ku'iai is going to go in our right hand. And with the pohaku, there's different parts. So on the bottom, we have our mole. Our mole is the bottom, our base. Then we have our ka'e, or edge. Some kupuna, some ohana call it the lihi as well. Then we have our ku'au. Our ku'au is the shaft where we actually hold our pohaku ku'iai. Then we have our poheo or maku'u. That means our top knot, so kind of like our top knot in our hair, our buns. So this kind of resembles that. We're gonna put our pohaku ku'iai in our dominant hand, and with a non-dominant hand, we're gonna put our hand into the water. Whenever we put our hand into the water to add vai, we never add water directly to the board. We always splash. We don't want any excess water on our board. So dip, splash. Then we're gonna add a thin layer of vai to our board. Then we're gonna do the same thing for our pohaku ku'iai. Add a thin layer of vai to our pohaku. With our kalo, we're gonna put it down and we're gonna use our ka'e or an edge. Rather than just go full ku'i mode right now, if we do that, our kalo is gonna go everywhere. So what we wanna do is use our ka'e to slowly break up the kalo. So with my left hand, I'm gonna form a wall, or I can hold it, and I'm gonna use the ka'e to cut into it. So I'm just slowly breaking into it. Because the kalo is it's so hard right now, this is one of the hardest stages. And this stage is called naha. Naha is to break or to smash. So slowly we've kind of moved into the stage of moku moku. Moku means islands, and right here we have our islands. I have Moku, Keawe, Oahu, Kauai. We have all our different islands. And one thing you might notice is if the kalo is sticking to your pohaku, we have two things we can use. We can dip, splash, and use your hand to remove the kalo, or we have our scrapers. So once we're at the stage of moku moku, we can add our next piece in and bring it to moku moku as well. This isn't a real fine ku'i yet. We're not trying to get all the bumps out. We're just trying to break it into smaller and more manageable pieces. And in these first stages, we're not going to add any water directly to the kalo. When you add water, that kind of locks it in. When you add the water, you won't be able to make changes to it because you won't be able to get those bumps out. So we keep it as dry as possible in the beginning so that we can focus on getting those bumps out in the later process. And even when you use your scraper, bring it out, splash. We don't want any excess water.
How's this looking? Is this moku moku?
That's about moku moku. So now we can move into the stage of pili'ai or ho'opili'ai. So I'm going to take my scraper, and pili means to stick, to bring together.
Okay.
So I'm going to use my scraper and bring it all together in one mass. And right here, once we have it in pili'ai, we are in the stage of holo'ai. Holo is to go, and ai is the food. So this is a Hawaiian to-go food.
Oh.
So like it took us maybe 5-10 minutes to do this.
Yeah.
You didn't have to spend a lot of time. You can eat it like this, or you can take it to the next stage of pa'iai or into the next stage of poi. One of my uncles taught me is that on long voyages, they would make the holo'ai like this. And then they would bring the papa ku'iai and the pohaku ku'iai on the voyage, and then they would finish and make the poi on the va'a. Or the more common response is the mo'opuna and keiki would make the holo'ai for their kupuna. And then they would go and finish it into the pa'iai that we're making. As we move into the next stage, I'm still gonna add another thin layer of vai to both my pohaku and my papa, just so that the kalo doesn't stick. Now we can actually start to move into the stage of ku'iai, so the actual pounding of the kalo. But like I said in the beginning, we're not gonna go full ku'i mode yet because it's still pili together, but it's not ho'opili. It's not really stuck together. It's not that ulika gummy texture that we want.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna take my ka'e, I'm just gonna slowly break it down. This is the stage that we wanna spend the most time on. This is the stage where we really look into our pa'iai, our kalo, and we try and take out all the little bumps out.
Is there any technique that you usually do?
So for me, I like to ku'i and I do a slight rock. So I ku'i and I rock forward. I learned that because once the kalo starts to stick, that creates an air pocket so that the pohaku, it's easier for it to release. Like I said, different ikekupuna, different islands, different ohanas had their own styles. I know people who do an anai, which is the rocking of the stone back and forth. I know people who do a ku'i anai, so they ku'i and then they anai and they move into an anai. For me personally, I know that when I anai, I add more water than what I would normally do when I ku'i. So that would affect how much bumps I get out, and then therefore the taste in the end. So I'm still not adding too much vai. I'm letting the kalo pile up on my pohaku, and then I take it off all one time. Some other styles I know is over time your dominant hand that you're using might start to get sore. So I know people who switch hands.
Oh.
They use both. They go in between both hands, or some people that do two hands. Sometimes when my arm starts to get sore, I make sure to use two hands just so I don't tire myself out faster. And once my pa'iai starts to get spread out, I can take my scraper again. First, take it off my pohaku. And then I can use my scraper to bring it back into the stage of pili, which is to stick together or bring together.
And then I know traditionally, you know, they would use papa ku'iai and pohaku ku'iai, but for those that may not have access to those kinds of resources, is there any maybe modern alternatives that we could use?
So just recently through COVID, me and my kumu, Rod Floral, we were able to host a few virtual ku'i lessons through Kamehameha Schools Culinary Arts and Health Department. We had some kalo donated from a local farmer, and we were able to do a kalo distribution and give all the students in the 7th grade class some kalo to take home and ku'i. One problem that we saw is we didn't have enough boards and stones. We told them, and one thing my kumu, Nick Kala Francisco, taught me is to use what get. So we took that concept and adapted it to our virtual ku'i. So we told students that all you need is something to ku'i on and something to ku'i with. So we had students using a cutting board and a mason jar.
What?
Or a cutting board and a coffee mug. We had the students using credit cards to flip and use it as their scraper because they didn't have the scraper that we use. We had spatulas, we had all kinds of different things, and it was really amazing to see that there was so many different styles. Moving into a more modern time, if we don't have the papa and pohaku to supply the people who want a ku'i, as long as you have the kalo, in your house you have many things that you can use. Just as long as you be clean about it and wash everything before, if you're using an old credit card or something like that, just making sure to wash and just keep clean about that, because one thing about haloa is that we're working with today is it's very clean. Hāloanakalaukapalili, we refer to him as our older brother in our Hawaiian cosmology through our kumulipo. So when working with kalo, we want to have good mana'o, good intentions, because it is our older brother. You wouldn't talk bad in front of your kupuna. You wouldn't talk bad in front of your tutu lady, your tutu man. So in our Hawaiian mo'olelo, haloa is our kupuna. So we always have good mana'o, good intentions going into a ku'i kalo. One thing that my other kumu, Isaac Ka'iana taught me is that this kalo, the pa'iai, the poi that we're making, it's sticky. So any mana, any mana'o, any words that you say, it's going straight into your food. It's gonna stick to it because that's how the nature of the kalo is. It's gonna stick to it, and then once you go to eat your pa'iai or your poi, it's gonna go straight back in you. So if you're putting out bad mana, it's just gonna go straight back in. So one thing I'm doing is while I am ku'i kalo, I'm using my hand to kind of fold and bring it in. And that's so that I spread my pa'iai across the board, and then I fold it back in so I can work other parts to get the bumps I may have missed.
And then when you're, using your hand, do you try to keep your fingers together, or? Between
different ohana, different kupuna, there's different styles. There's the ohana that puts their palm down and flips up. There's the ohana that puts their palm up and flips down. I know some ohana, especially when we move into the later stages of Waipiʻo Valley, they use both hands and go like this to bring it all together.
Oh. Do you have any tips for people that want to try and ku'i kalo?
I think the first thing, if anybody wants to ku'i kalo or get kalo, is to look out and try and and make those connections to different local farmers who have kalo, or if you don't have those contacts, talking to your ohana, talking to your friends about who may know someone who has kalo. And the second thing is, once you find your local farmer, ask them if they have huli for you. If you can take some huli so that you can start growing kalo in your yard, so that you can do the whole process from A to Z, from the actual planting of the kalo to the harvesting of the kalo to the cooking, and then finally to making the poi. And even if you don't have space, I know one of my uncles, he doesn't have any aina to plant in, so he has like the entire kalo collection in pots.
Yeah.
He's growing out of pots. And that's different ike kupuna. I mean, we didn't have pots back in Ikabakahiko, but using modern technology and using things to help us still perpetuate our culture. Okay, so now we're in the stage of pa'iai. This is what I would call pa'iai. We have taken most of the bumps out. We may not have gotten all the bumps out, however, most of it's out and we're ready to start turning into poi. But before we do that, I'm gonna show you something that we use when we ku'i kalo. This is a way to slowly add water, because what we don't want to do is just directly add water until the very end.
Yeah.
So what I do is dip, splash, I tap the bottom of my pohaku, I ku'i, ku'i, ku'i. My hand is still wet. So once I hear that stick, I tap again, because that will reapply water.
Okay.
And what this does, this serves multiple purposes. My hand is still wet, so it allows me to add water to the pohaku so that the pa'iai and poi doesn't stick. But another thing is, if you think about our kupuna, they were making maybe 50 to 100 or more pounds of pa'iai at once. They didn't have machines to make commercial size for their big luau's or whatever they had. So they were just doing kuʻi kalo, and after a while, your hand can get sore if repeating the same motion over and over again. So when doing this little motion, when you hit, it takes off the tension and puts it onto your left arm. And that's a kind of break for your right arm. So all the shock from the actual ku'i, it goes into your hand. Another thing I do to relieve the pressure is after I ku'i, I do a slight let go. Not majorly, I just ku'i, let go, and bring it back up. What that does is it takes the pressure off your shoulder, off your right arm, and it puts the shock into the board. And once I do ku'i and let go, when I go to re-grab my pohaku, I pop my wrist. And what that does, it creates an air pocket between the pohaku and the pa'iai so that it's easier to come off.
So I know you've been talking about this gummy consistency. Are we at that stage?
So yeah, for me, this is finished pa'iai right here. We have the finished undiluted poi. Most of our bumps are out already, and we're moving on to the next stage of poi. When making different consistencies, there's many factors that goes into it. So first, how much waiʻi you add and when you add it in the process. Right now we have a nice ulika gummy texture because we didn't add water at the beginning, and we only started to add more water towards this ending stage while we're getting to poi. The second factor in how consistencies are is the quality of kalo and how well you clean your kalo. When we go to eat our sara poi, which is where the medicine is found and the health benefits are found in the pa'iai, in the poi, is after fermentation. We don't eat fresh poi. We let it sit on the table for 2 to 3 days, and then we eat the sour poi. And in the sour poi is all the health benefits, all the nutrients that we need, all the probiotics. One of the last things that determines how consistent and what texture your pa'iai will be is the varieties of kalo. In Hawaii, we have about 60 known kalo varieties that we still cultivate and farm today. Every single variety has a characteristic and trait of its own. Some of them make yellow poi, some of them make green poi, some of them make blue.
Oh, blue.
So it really depends on the variety. There's different characteristics such as the lau, the color, the shape, the height. They all play a factor into what variety it is. So different varieties make different consistencies and different textures. One thing that you might notice while I'm kuʻi kalo is it creates a nice beat. There's always a music to it. And just like hula, every kumu hula has their different style of chanting. Every kumu hula has a different way of putting the ipu or hitting the pahu. So every kuʻi kalo practitioner, everyone who kuʻi kalos, they have their own beat. There's this one mo'olelo that my papa told me that back in our olden days when everybody used to kuʻi kalo because we didn't have rice and pa'iai was our main, one of our main sources of carbohydrates and starches. When you were traveling throughout different ahupua'a, you would know exactly who's making poi in the ahupua'a just by the sound of it, because everyone had their own distinct sound. So one thing that's important is when you go to kuʻi kalo is you take all the different ways you learned, you listen to their beats, their styles, and then you make your own. Okay, so now we're gonna move into the stage of ho'o-wali or ho'o-wali-wali. Okay. So what that is adding and mixing in the water. Wali is to mix, and ho'o-wali, we connotate that to adding and mixing water. Okay. So what we're gonna do is clean our pohaku, make sure we don't have any pa'iai that we don't wanna waste, and then we can put our pohaku on the side on the top. So what you're gonna wanna do is wet both your hands, because you're gonna be using your hands. Okay. This is gonna be like kneading and folding like dough for bread. I take a fistful of water and go straight into the center. You can use your scraper to help you, and we're just bringing the water in. So I fold the water in and I push it in to lock it in. Once I start to feel the kalo and pa'iai start to stick to my hands, I add another fistful of water. Right now, we just want to work in small increments until we're ready to add the big amounts of water. So for me, I find it easier to use the scraper to help me, but I know some kupuna and most people use both hands to work with. So they bring their water in and they use their hands to flip and scrape and bring it together. I've been doing this for a while now. Just because it may be your first time and your kalo may have been a little overripe or you added too much water, don't be discouraged. This is a thing that, like anything, this is a thing that takes practice and time to learn. And as you can see slowly, as we slowly start to incorporate and add more water, it is getting more watered down and it's getting to that poi level consistency that you kind of see in stores.
And then after we, get it to the consistency of poi, what is the protocol or traditions around eating poi?
So traditionally, the ohana we make as an ohana. They would ihi kalo, they would plant the kalo together, they would harvest the kalo, they would go through all the processes, and then they would make one big batch of poi. They all made individual batches, maybe more or less than some, but then a lot of times what we would do is we would take all the different batches of paella, put it into one, on one papa, and we would ho'ovali like how we're doing it all into one batch. It's not just because we want to save containers or save umekes to put the poi in, it's to signify that we did this as an ohana together, and when we ho'ovali it all together, that shows that we were able to do something as an ohana as a family, and we were able to create a finished product that might not just feed us as an individual, but us as a family, and then we can maybe make more for our community and our lahui to share. So for me, this is what I would call finished poi for my ohana. This is what I would eat. But your ohana, you might want it more watered down, less watered down, so that's all personal preference and up to you.
So you've taken us from cleaning the kalo to going to the different phases of Kuʻi Kalo. You've taught us about the different parts of the pohaku kuʻi ai. Is there anything else that we should know?
Don't be afraid to Kuʻi Kalo. One thing that my papa always said is it's in your DNA. If you have ancestors, kupuna, ohana, that Kuʻi Kalos or grows kalo or just anything with kalo, it's in your DNA, you have it in you. So don't be afraid to jump on a board and stone and start to Kuʻi Kalo, or get your mason jar and cutting board and start to Kuʻi Kalo. It's in you. And for those that your ohana may not have those cultural connections or those kalo connections, don't be afraid to try, because we need more people to perpetuate and learn how to Kuʻi Kalo so that we can keep this important practice alive.